Bianca here. Just a quick disclaimer before the interview starts. Here's a reminder that all of Evie's books are intended for a mature audience, and in this interview we will not be discussing in depth or in an explicit way some of these themes. However, this video is not suitable for kids. The second thing is that you can find in the description a link to the Amazon store where you can purchase the book. A reminder that the book is in English and unfortunately there are no translations available in Brazilian Portuguese. And the third and final thing is that this video will have subtitles in both English and Brazilian Portuguese. The top ones in black are closed captions in English. The bottom ones in yellow highlight are Brazilian Portuguese. Another important thing is that I had a problem with the audio recording of the first 3 minutes of the interview. But fortunately this only happened at the beginning and the rest of the video is completely fine. I think that's pretty much it, and thank you for watching and enjoy! Hi, my name is Bianca. I am a beginner proofreader and translator for the language pair Brazilian Portuguese and English. I am single-sided deaf and chronically ill, and I talk about disability and accessibility on my social media. Today we're here with author Evie Mitchell to talk a little bit about her book, Not My Type, the first book of the All Access series, which features disabled main characters. In Not My Type, Frankie, a paraplegic sexologist, meets Jay, a carpenter. Despite their strong chemistry, they struggle with their different views on relationships, leading them to question their beliefs about love and commitment. Evie, thank you so much for being here today. To start, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and the beginning of your writing career?
I come from the land of the Ngunnawal people in Canberra, Australia, which is located in Australia's Capital Territory. I am best known for Not My Type, which is a small town inclusive romance. I really specialise in body positivity stories, so stories that celebrate people of all sizes, shapes and abilities, or disabilities as the case may be. I do a lot of rom-coms, but I also have another side to my books, which is my post-apocalyptic series called The Nameless Souls, which is like a motorcycle romance with really smart women and, you know, kind of over-the-top alphas, and that's set in Australia, which is a lot of fun. I've been writing since 2019, and yeah, I'm full-time now, which is really exciting.
In your Goodreads bio, you mentioned that you're a specialist in fiercely inclusive happily ever afters. What inspired you to write novels featuring main characters with disabilities? Did your personal experience with disability play a role in it?
Absolutely. So I myself live with chronic illness. I actually have multiple chronic illnesses. So for me, one of the things that I really try and do in my writing is talk about disabled joy, but also talk about body positivity. So when we talk about the types of heroines and even heroes, so the male main characters, they don't need to be kind of like these buff guys. You know, there's a couple of my characters that are, plus size men, because everyone is worthy of love. And, you know, I've got many characters that live with disabilities. I've got many that are different sizes, shapes, different backgrounds, different lived experiences. And I think it's really important to build that and have that opportunity to be seen and have yourself represented in a book and know that you're worthy of love.
Something that can be really difficult for people to reconceptualize. And I know for me, when I was first diagnosed, that idea of being worthy of love, of being enough, was something that I really struggled with. I felt like I was a burden to people, and I really felt and struggled with what my body looked like and the shapes that it changed through because I was on, different medication. And I wanted to write stories which really embraced people where they were and, really encourage people to not only love the body that they're in, but acknowledge that they are worthy of love, and that they are able to find love and be loved, be desirable. And that for me was a really kind of cool part of the reason that I write.
And what is your favorite thing about Frankie and Jay's relationship?
I think it's the communication, if I'm honest. Like, they're quite cheeky to each other. But I think more importantly, they learn through communication how to be transparent and how to be honest with each other. And, even those days, it's a bit of a switch at different points, we'll say that nicely. They work their way out of that through communication, and it's really healthy. And I love the fact that they set good boundaries with each other and tell each other what they need. I think in a good relationship, in a healthy relationship, that's what we all desire, is that clear communication, is understanding each other's boundaries, understanding what makes the other person tick, understanding, how to unlock other people's desires. And so for me, it's definitely the communication between them.
Yeah, that's a favorite part of the relationship that I enjoy most while reading the book. And speaking of that, do you have a favorite moment in the book?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people would say it would be where he knocks down the wall in her bathroom. But my favorite is that's probably up there. But I think my favorite is that he's introducing her to the dinosaurs in the yard. Because it's just such a cute moment where the background for anyone listening is he's got all of these dinosaur born ornaments. And she's just like, what is this? But I think it's such a cute moment because it really shows that as adults, we don't have to grow up and lose a lot of that joy. I think we can still embrace the things that bring us joy. And particularly if we've had traumatic childhoods or we've experienced any kind of parentification of ourselves as children, embracing that joy and that nostalgia for things that were from our childhood is really powerful. It's a lovely way to kind of, recapture some of those experiences that either we didn't have or were lost through different trauma. So yeah, I actually really like his introduction of that as well.
I love that he has a Lego tattoo, and then I think in some part of the book he says something like "play is a right." I think it's Frankie that actually says that. That was so meaningful. And moving on, I love the idea behind Frankie's podcast. Do you have any recommendations on similar podcasts in real life?
Yeah, so there's a few. So I've made a list. I'll just read some of them now. So a couple of them are more Australian based, but they're wonderful, absolutely wonderful. So the first I'd recommend. The first I'd recommend is Reasonable by Dylan Alcott and Agatha Loughlin. So Dylan is actually a Paralympian. He also is one of Australia's best tennis players ever. I think he's the only or one of the only people to have gotten the golden tennis. I can't remember what it's called. But essentially he's won all of the Grand Slams type thing. So they speak with people. So the Listenable podcast by Dylan Alcott, and Angus O'Loughlin, they speak with people with disability about their lives, and they look to break down stigma of those living with disability by asking questions that you wouldn't normally feel comfortable asking. So it's kind of like a you can't ask that situation where they do ask those questions. So they've talked to people about how they applied their disability, people about some of the barriers that they experience. They really go into what are people's experiences through life, through love, through sex, through relationships, through the workplace. It's a really powerful and podcast, and I highly recommend it. There's also Let Us In, which is by Kurt Finley and Sarah Shams, and they unpack issues around Australians facing disability. So it seems like what is accessible transport and what is accessible housing, and how do people live with accessible work environments or lived environment. It's really great. So that's more Australian based, but I think it's got a lot of disability across the world. Then there's Disability Download by Erin O'Reilly, which is about a wide range of disability-related topics, including technology, ableism, hobbies, leisure, careers. Really fantastic. But the one that might be most interesting for some people, particularly if they're looking for something that's more around kind of the taboo of disability, is Disability After Dark. It's a conversation between Andrew and guests who discuss disability, sexuality, and all sorts of other things that people don't generally talk about when it comes to disability, so things like kink, creative association with disability. They talk a lot about, there was one episode they did that was all about like toilet habits of people with disability, which is really interesting. To talk about, what does a sexual tourism look like for people. So yeah, it's a fantastic podcast and highly recommend.
I really like the name Disability After Dark. It's a really nice name. A favorite quote of mine appears in chapter 12. I found it really touching and was wondering if you could talk a little bit about its meaning and what's the message behind it. The quote says as, "Safe spaces are great, but brave spaces are where it's at for me, and brave spaces mean inviting people in and building connections that might not otherwise exist. They're all about constructive discomfort."
Yeah. So I can't remember exactly where I heard about brave spaces. It might have been like Brene Brown or Christina Ryan from Disability Leadership Institute. But there's a difference between a safe space, which is all about security, belonging, an area that's free from judgment and is really safe from harm and risk. So I like to think of safe spaces as like the cuddle, like you come home, you're like a little bit stressed out, you need to rant about something or you need to talk about something or that kind of thing, and you go to your partner or you go to your family and you say to them, I just need a hug. And then you have that hug and you have people listening, it's all very respectful and you kind of working well. And we need those spaces in our lives. We need those safe spaces where we can fall, where there's no judgment, where it's, people who are there to lift us up and make us feel like we belong and really wrap ourselves in that love. But I think what's happened in the public discourse is we've really stopped with the discomfort and we've moved more into the comfort. And so when we talk about brave spaces, they're spaces that really encourage risk. So they're spaces where we ask you to actually enter them into a space of respect and trust. But they're places that we go where we can challenge and confront our biases and that we can encourage courageous conversations that encourage people to look at things that might hold a lot of discomfort for them, that might require them to really break down biases that they didn't realize that they had, or to really look at things from a different perspective. And those spaces are respectful and they hold space for that discomfort, for those opposing positions and views without antagonism. And so I think what we do is we conflate safe spaces with brave spaces. But I think what we need to do is really recognize that they're two different spaces and they have served different purposes, but they are just as important as each other.
Amazing! And now we're moving on to a little bit of a taboo topic, but which is the main point of your book. Not the main point, but one of the points that your book brings, that sex is still a taboo topic in the disabled community. This comes from the harmful stereotype that disabled people are pure, immaculate saints that will and should never experience this type of intimacy with a partner. There is a scene in the book where Frankie shares with Jay her personal experience with ableism and how it inspired her to become a sexologist. Could you elaborate on the importance of the representation your book brings on the deconstruction of such prejudiced vision?
Yeah. So I think there's actually three types of schools of thought around disability and sex. And this is talked about in the After Dark podcast, by the way, if anyone's kind of interested in that. So there's like the purity kind of thing where it's, that kind of immaculate saint concept. There's the over-sexualization or fetishization of people with disability, and I think that can also be really harmful. But then there's the idea that people who acquire a disability or who are disabled are just suddenly asexual beings. And so, which isn't the case. Asexuality is a part of the queer identity, it's a part of sexuality, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're disabled and you suddenly become asexual. I think one of the things for me as a writer of romance and romantic relationships is I get to really look at this span of sexuality and desirability and say to people, well, actually, what that looks like for everyone is individual. Just because we're disabled doesn't mean we don't have desires and that we're not desirable. I think sex can be about connection, but it can also be about release. It can be about love, but it can also just be about getting on. So when we talk about it, I think what we can see is that if the more that we normalize sex in relationships and the more that we normalize talking about what desirability is and what sex looks like for people who may have disability, the more that we can normalize that conversation and get people to kind of break down those ideas of, the same-sex or the asexual, the fetishism. One of the things for me that's been really powerful, having written Not My Type and had doing signings, is the amount of people who have come up to me to discuss how that book impacted them, even though they themselves aren't necessarily disabled. I've had a few people I've got one lady, for example, who was saying, she's been going through some menopause, and what she experienced was sex wasn't as enjoyable for her because she was experiencing dryness. And what she did was when she read Not My Type and Frankie talks about what she needs in the bedroom, one of the things that she talks about is that sometimes she might need lube. And this woman said she basically read that, started crying, and went to her partner and said to them, hey, this is what I need. And from there, she was able to re-engage into sex. She was like, it changed the shape of her partnership with that person because she was able to be more honest about what she needed. She was able to ask for them to recognize the fact that her body had changed and what used to work for her doesn't work anymore. And that's really powerful. That's why we write the stories that we write about disability, because it's not just someone who is, user who might get something out of it. It is people who experience similar symptoms. It's people who experience similar conversations or fears or rejection, and they want to find something that will resonate with them and give power back into their experience. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity that we get to have as readers, is to give people something that they can resonate with.
Yeah, that was really so meaningful, and I felt really powerful while reading a book. I felt seen. I felt, wow, like I know that it's something it's obvious, but for me, and I think that for many other disabled people, it's not as obvious that we are worthy and we deserve to be desired, to be able to express these desires, and that is something that it should be normal, but in our society, unfortunately, most of the time it is not seen as so. But I'm glad that your book is out there making these changes and impacting positively on other people's lives, whether they are disabled or not.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think one of the things that it's wonderful that readers can find joy. I think one of the things that I would encourage people to do is read diversely, because when you read diversely from, BIPOC authors, when you read diversely from disabled authors, when you read diversely from our LGBTIQ A+ SB authors, you get these perspectives and this learning and understanding of the world, and you are able to walk through it in a different way, and in a better way. I think it's a much richer view and tapestry that you're building of the world. You'll never experience exactly what that person's going through, but understanding some of the nuance of it and being able to find something that you resonate to is just such a beautiful reading experience. I know, I was reading something recently, and this author just wrote the most gorgeous turn of phrase, and I just thought how rich my life is because of that. Like, it's fantastic.
And we're moving on to our last questions. And would you like for your books to be published in Brazil someday?
Yeah, so I hope to actually announce more on that topic later this year. Which is very exciting. But yeah, definitely, 100%.
Okay, and that was our last question. And Evie, thank you so much for being here today. Is there anything else you'd like to say to your fans in Brazil?
Thank you so much for reading. I think I am a huge fan of reading diversely, and I think I would love to get to Brazil one day. That would be like a dream come true for me. So if anyone knows any signings, please let me know. But yes, I really hope to have more translations coming soon, which I hope to announce. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to engaging more.
All right, guys, this was Evie Mitchell today here with us, and thank you for watching, and bye-bye.